All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this evening's council workshop to order. This is the council workshop for Monday, May 13th at 7 o'clock. Council, there's been an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda is presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption agenda? Moved by Councillor Forbes, second by Councillor Ma. Call the question, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. Next, there is a set of meeting minutes that have been circulated with the agenda. This is for the December 12th council workshop. Are there any errors or omissions from those meeting minutes as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move their adoption? Moved by Councillor Forbes, second by Councillor Murray. Prepared to call the question, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. All right, this evening we have two items on our agenda for council's consideration. This is the Renovate the Public Hearing Initiative, followed by the Spirit Trail Eastern Extension update. I do recognize that a lot of people in the room are here for the second item, but we have remote participants for the first item that we scheduled them to be a part of the meeting. And so I am going to move the items forward in the order that they were agreed to. What I've been told is that the presentation is about 20 minutes long for the first item, and then obviously council discussion, however long we so choose at that point. And then we'll move on to the next item of the evening. I know there's a number of people who expressed an interest to speak. I have 3 people that are signed up to speak. Our policy on council workshops is obviously it's an opportunity for council to ask their questions ahead of time, unlike a public hearing or a regular public meeting of council where obviously the public comments come first. In this format, it's council's questions that are addressed first. If we have time at the end of the meeting, our policy is to allow up to 10 minutes of time for public comment at that time as well. We do have 3 speakers signed up to speak. So I'm going to progress through the agenda as presented. And so the first item up is the Renovate the Public Hearing Initiative. And we do have speakers online that are going to be speaking to this item. I'm not entirely certain, is that Trudy that's going to be speaking to this item? Nicole.
Hi, good evening. We have a whole team here for you tonight.
Fantastic. If you could introduce your team, that would be a great way to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much for having us here tonight, Mayor and Council. We're shortly going to be joined by Amina Yazin, who's the director for the Renovate the Public Hearing Initiative. My name is Trudy Goals. I am the program manager. And with us, we also have Nicole Armas and Claire Adams, who are with our knowledge and practice team. Our project is housed within the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University, and we all work collectively in that space. We'd sent some slides in ahead of time. Are they going to be shown for us, or should I be doing a screen share?
She's going to do the slides. You're going to be doing your own slides. If that's all right.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Just let me get them up here.
Fantastic.
There you go. Thanks so much. All right. Our project has been funded through CMHC's Housing Supply Challenge. We've been on this project for a couple of years now. And we are partnered with the BC Law Institute that's doing a review of the legal implications of legislative change to public hearings and how public hearings can be better aligned with UNDRIP. And we've also partnered with City Hive, who work with youth in municipal spaces to understand how to get youth more engaged in land use planning and decision making.
Trudy, just before you continue on, is there any way to make that full screen?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that for you. Is that better?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your patience with that. So in the early part of our project, we went out and spoke with different stakeholders. So we were looking with folks in local government, both staff and elected officials. We spoke with community members, with people who are developing with land. And we got a lot of input around what was working and what isn't working around public hearings. And we heard a couple of really big themes. One is that it's really important to include the public and get input on land use decisions. What came up was when should that really happen and how should that happen? So those were things that we started to look at. There was a lot of discussion around public hearings being really challenging, didn't matter what size community people were in. There's obstacles and barriers in place for people to participate. Decision makers always didn't feel like they were getting information at the right time that could help with making a project better. And sometimes there was risks to projects, especially in the nonprofit area, of financial loss if a project was rejected at public hearing. So there's a real great desire to deepen and create more robust public engagement opportunities to actually make better decision-making around land use. And there's already a lot of innovation that's been happening in communities. And so we went exploring to see what's already happening and learn from what's already going on out there. So once we'd heard all of this, we pulled together some folks and held an innovators forum to understand what some of our opportunities were. What could we go and try in community? We did some live real-time trials over the last 2 years to see what could work, what's already happening that we should evaluate, and some things that folks wanted us to keep in mind. So really, they wanted to understand what the financial impacts were of public hearings in general and what it would look like if we changed them. What it would look like to create a more democratic dialogue type space where we're talking about housing instead of debating a decision at the end, how we could make these spaces and opportunities more accessible for the public, for staff, for elected officials, so that everyone has an opportunity to participate well, and how we ensure privacy and safety around people's participation. And with that also came up the ideas of like, how do we ensure that these processes are democratically legitimate? How do they build trust in community? How do we trust that our decision makers are getting the best information at the best time so that they're making great decisions around it? So taking all of that into consideration, we looked at a few opportunities that we could do. So we found a city that was already doing upstream engagement and not holding public hearings. So we've done an analysis of their work to understand what's working in there and if there's some best practices that come out of that. We have been exploring community assemblies, which we're going to talk about a little bit more tonight as well with you. We have looked at what it would be like to change the signage or notification of land use in communities, and if that would impact or change any of this. If there's accessibility pieces that need to be revised or reviewed, and then what it's like to actually embed UNDRIP and lead with our Indigenous communities or with Indigenous communities rather than focusing strictly on the legislative pieces around this work as well. So in order to go out and actually trial some of these pieces in the community, we needed to find out what already existed in municipalities. So did we already have public notification and rezoning signage bylaws that existed? Are they published in every community? Are there already common practices that we could take from that? And what would it take to actually make like province-wide changes around those pieces? We also really wanted to know what communities have for public engagement resources. We know in larger municipalities, some of them have public engagement staff that are dedicated to this kind of work. For others, it might be the planning department who takes it on. For some, it might be someone who's doing it off the side of their desk because they haven't been well resourced for this. So understanding what resources are out there and what resources might be needed and where those could come from is really important as we come to the end of this project, which we're just sort of wrapping up in June, and we'll have some recommendations around this. We need to know that we can make recommendations that are truly feasible and sustainable in community. And then one of the other pieces that we have been working on is we've had a consultant who's been doing land use analysis to really understand what the financial impact is of public hearings. I mentioned a little bit at the beginning around, especially around nonprofit housing, what happens when there's been millions of dollars in investment into a development that then gets rejected at public hearing? And is there a way to prevent that from happening so that we can ensure that that money doesn't get lost or doesn't get absorbed into future housing projects and have an impact on future housing instead? I'm just going to check in with folks and see if we've been able, Genevieve, do you know if we've been able to get Amina promoted to a panelist?
Thank you. Through your worship, we're having some technical difficulties with our Zoom link right now. We're trying to resolve it, but we'll let you know as soon as possible.
Thank you. I think I'm going to go through these. I'll pass through these slides and we'll come back when Amina's online because she has some information to share with us. And I'm going to ask Nicole if she could step in and speak about public engagement principles for us.
Absolutely. So this part of the process came knowing that we know that public participation as part of our land use process is really important. It's an enshrined right, and it helps us plan communities in a way that meets diverse needs efficiently. But we also know that the design and the implementation of public participation processes impact their ability to serve the needs of the public, planners, elected officials, and developers. So as part of this project, we've analyzed legislative requirements for public hearings, the strengths and challenges of current public hearing practices across BC, and the core principles and values of public participation practice as articulated by organizations such as the OECD and the International Association for Public Participation, IAP2. We wanted to essentially distill the core functions of public hearings. What are they there for, as well as the principles that ensure that public participation for land use planning is ethical, effective, and legitimate, regardless of the model that is employed. So these are the principles we have then used as a framework to assess the strengths and weaknesses of different public participation models, including public hearings, as well as other models of upstream engagement, residence assemblies, et cetera, that we'll discuss in greater detail in a moment. So we're still working on refining this language, working towards the final draft of our research. But the working model is that public participation for land use planning should strive to be first equitable, so seeking out and facilitating the participation of everyone who is potentially affected by land use planning decisions, including proactive measures to address barriers to accessibility that impact particular groups, and ensuring the safety and dignity of all participants, ensuring that the safety and dignity of all participants is upheld during the process. Second, it should be evidence-based, so creating conditions for informed deliberation on land use decisions, which might include providing members of the public with accurate information, as well as framing invitations for the participation so that we're really soliciting the most relevant information that will then support the deliberation that is done by elected officials. Third, it should be democratically legitimate, so ensuring that the process is transparent, accountable, and demonstrates integrity throughout. Fourth, it should be sustainable. So really ensuring that the costs that are placed on the public, city staff, developers, and elected officials are manageable. And that's where that financial analysis really is a big, important piece of this. And then finally, advancing reconciliation. So recognizing that Indigenous peoples' ancestral ties to these lands and their inherent and distinct treaty, constitutional, and human rights, as well as the responsibility that we all hold to work in a spirit of reconciliation, whether we're specifically engaging Indigenous peoples or engaging other communities on Indigenous territories. And so from here, I'll pass it along to Claire, I believe, to start sharing a little bit more about particular models we're looking at.
Yeah, so one of the models, we're going to talk about two, there's lots of different models for engagement. We're just highlighting two tonight, but there's many tools in the toolbox. So one that we've been looking into is online upstream engagement. So by upstream, we mean just the project information and public input is sought very early on in the development process. So we've done a case study with the city of New Westminster, who had identified that one of the sort of challenges, and we've seen this throughout our municipal scans, is that the public are often engaged too late in the development process. So the reason we sort of looked at New West's use of online tools was because they had, prior to the introduction of Bill 44, under Bill 26, they had opted to waive some public hearings for projects which met the official community plan. But they still wanted to hear from community. That was a really big priority for mayor and council. So the way they did this was, and we know a lot of municipalities have these online platforms, but they're not all being used to the same degree. They would have a project page on their Be Heard website that would solicit feedback very early on in the application process, where community could provide comment and feedback on applications before they'd reached their third reading. And with that, an engagement summary of all the comments could then be delivered to council for their review and to help make changes or to make modifications to applications and to help them make a decision on these bylaws. And we will have a report coming soon with some sort of detailed findings on this, but sort of some of the high level findings are that this is a process which helps to remove some of those barriers which Trudy alluded to earlier. So things like folks who might be shift workers who might not be able to participate in a public hearing, or folks with caregiving responsibilities, and even just that element of unpredictability of how long it may take to participate. And it can be a more sustainable process for both the community and for staff and council. But it's important to note that online doesn't automatically equal diversity. So it's important to also consider how to reach folks and let them know about this process. And I think we're just going to move on to residence assemblies. Amina was planning on doing this slide. Trudy, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, I think Nicole's going to chip in here. Thanks, Nicole.
Great.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, I can jump into to give a bit of a description of essentially what a residence assembly is, and then we'll get into the details of what that's looked like in Gibson's in particular. So essentially, residence assembly is a model for deliberative democracy that actually was developed here in BC with the BC Citizens Assembly on Electoral Reform in 2004. It's since been developed and actually has moved around the world and become what's being named by the OECD as a deliberative wave. This model being picked up in various places because it incorporates certain elements of public participation in a really structured and rigorous way that can support greater legitimacy for, especially for more contentious issues. So a few of those aspects of the model that make it very unique. First, the recruitment is done by civic lottery. So this is essentially recruiting folks by mail. Usually randomly selected households receive a package in the mail, inviting them to be a part of this assembly. And then out of the folks who register their interest, a graphically representative group is selected via an algorithm. And so essentially you can choose certain criteria of the demographics of a community that are particularly important to have represented in a process, whether that's gender, age, ethnicity, etc., and ensure that there's a representative sample of that in the group who is being assembled. Then to support deeper deliberation, there's a period of learning and visioning where members are connected with evidence-based information about the particular aspects of the land use planning, in this case, that they're going to be exploring. They hear diverse perspectives from sometimes community organizations or different experts and representatives of different community needs, so that they're in touch with different aspects of the decision. And then they go through a certain amount of visioning stage to also identify shared values and goals for the decision coming up. Then there's a period of deliberation where they actually examine municipal policy options and work through trade-offs in relation to those values that were identified in the visioning stage, in order to provide evidence-based recommendations, which City Council can then respond to. And so a lot of these aspects, the deliberation, the length of the process in particular, usually where public hearings might be just one evening, a residence assembly is going to be multi-day over a series of weeks, so that people have time to really learn about the issue and go through that longer process of deliberation, and also that aspect of council responding back, and the diversity of the group itself are those salient pieces that make this really a different model for public participation. And from there, I'll move, Trudy, maybe you can share a little bit more details of what that looked like in Gibson's.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So the reason why we're digging in a little deeper to this residence assembly is that while we were doing this work on the Renovate the Public Hearing Initiative, we were looking at all these different ways in which we can consider adapting and adopting different practices around public hearings and what it might take for legislative change. And of course, Bill 44 came into play at the same time. And this has become a little more urgent to find really robust upstream engagement opportunities. So the work that we've been doing around residence or community assemblies has been really relevant right now. So I wanted to share a little information about one that we've been doing. We've just wrapped up actually with the town of Gibson's. So assemblies are often done in larger populations, and Gibson's is just slightly under 5,000 people. We wanted to know if this could actually work in the town of Gibson's. So mayor and council were really excited to have this be the initial kickoff for their OCP engagement, as they are going in to do their refresh work right now. And the question, they unanimously approved this project, which was great. So we had full support of council. The planners were super excited to get involved in this work. And the question that they landed on that they wanted the assembly to deliberate on was, how can the town of Gibson's best plan for the future and meet the housing needs of Gibson's? It's a little vague and broad so that we had an opportunity to find issues that are really pertinent to the community and be able to get into them for education and deliberation, and still be able to provide some really great information for mayor and council's consideration. So for this particular project, we did the mail out that Nicole talked about. We had 274 people apply to it, and using an algorithm that looks at the demographics of the community and who applied, we found 25 applicants who were a great match, who made a real representation of the community at large. They stayed with we had 5 sessions with them. They were 6 hours each, and we did, nobody left us. They were all stuck through the whole thing. They were actually super engaged throughout of it. And the town is considering, now that they have this engaged and informed cohort, to have them stay on as a potential advisory body as they move on to the rest of their work. Claire, do you want to share a little bit more about the stats around this?
Sure, yeah. With the Gibson's Assembly, they have a relatively small population, so mid-sized sort of small population, so less than 5,000 people. And we did a process whereby, because it was a smaller population, and a larger population, you might only deliver to a certain amount of households. But we did a large mail out to try and spread the word to as many residents in Gibson's as possible. We were recruiting, based on the population size, 25 participants. And we had a really great diversity that reflected the diversity of Gibson. So it was really based on those demographics. So we had pretty even split of gender representation, and we also had one participant who didn't identify within the gender binary. We had 2 youth participants, so in the 16 to 24 age bracket. And we also had a higher population of seniors participating, just to reflect the fact that Gibson's has a higher senior population. And we saw Indigenous representation and representation from 5 folks who identified as having a disability. And we also saw representation from renters and those who were experiencing precarious housing. And the quote there just is from a staff member who noted that, you know, these are not the people we typically see at public hearings. So just highlighting that it did really bring in folks who might not typically have engaged in traditional processes.
Thanks, Claire. So the big question we often get is, you know, what does it cost to do this, and what are the things that you need to consider? So I just wanted to share some pieces of budget items that we considered as we were looking at this. So there's the obvious things whenever you're doing engagement, is that we need a place to hold it, things to feed people, make sure that we have all the tools that we need to do the job. But we really wanted to make this accessible. So as we were identifying and confirming participants, we were understanding what they needed in order to participate. So did they need translation or interpretation, ASL services? We had an honoraria fund to ensure that anybody who needed to have income replacement or couldn't attend for other reasons, that they would be compensated for their time. We created childcare and a transportation fund that was also available ad hoc if anybody required any funding for anything to be able to meet it. And our goal was really to meet participants where they were at, to reduce as many barriers as possible to participation. Some other committees or assemblies have had other issues, like around travel expenses that they've needed if they've had facilitators or subject matter experts who needed to travel. You may want to have photos and videos taken for future publications. You may want to have a separate advisory committee, and there may be some costs along with that. Can also, if you have a large group, you might be looking at some like cool technology for doing things like voting or other sort of options to be able to make it a little more interactive for people. So there's lots of variations in how this can be budgeted and funded. The one big piece that I just want to say is not a question for any of this that we've done. The Center for Dialogue is actually doing a number of these right now, is how we fund for Indigenous engagement. And it always comes in at the top of the budget so that we make sure it's a priority, and how we're actually doing this work if we're trying to make it an act of reconciliation as well. Do you want me to keep going, Claire?
I can speak to this, Trudy,
Okay, great, thanks.
if that helps. And I'll just note, Amina is still waiting. If our tech team there can help try and get her on board for at least the question period, that would be great. So yeah, this is just a bit of a breakdown of what the members got out of the process and what Mayor and Council did. So members got these really wide range of presentations on topics, including UNDRIP/DRIPA, Municipal 101 and sort of the housing needs report as well. And they developed a set of values, which would then go on to inform the whole process, but also the OCP itself. They participated in a walking tour site survey to get an understanding of what different forms of density and residential development look like, and also ideas of potentially future developments. They rated sort of different housing scenarios, which were based on all of the work we'd done up until that point to figure out what would actually meet the values that they'd previously voted on. And then they deliberated, and this was kind of our final session that we've just wrapped up, and voted on a final set of recommendations, which came from all that work that they had done previously, which will be provided to Mayor and Council with our presentation coming up on June 4th. And what Mayor and Council got out of this was they got informed insights from a representative sample of their constituents, and they can get an understanding of what really matters to the community and what should be informing their OCP. Understanding of what forms of housing that the community would sort of support and where it should go. And those recommendations, which will set the stage for all of the work on the OCP going forward. And they now potentially have a group of residents who could be an advisory body to participate in an ongoing basis. I think I can try and speak back to briefly to our financial slides if we don't think we can get Amina online.
Sure, thanks, Claire.
I'll do my best. I'm not nearly as skilled as Amina is talking about this. We just basically want to highlight with this that one of our sort of key pieces is that financial analysis for public hearings and how that can affect the viability of certain developments. So we will have a sort of a more extensive report coming from our land economist. But the findings here is like sort of showing the viability of different developments. And this was something we really tried to also use our residents assembly to inform people who might not previously have understood why certain forms of development are harder for developers to work with, whether that's especially sort of for us, our main focus has been on nonprofit housing. But maybe Amina can speak more to that. I'll just sort of briefly leave it at that, and we will have more information coming in our final report about that. And we can open up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think I'll just give folks like sort of one last statement. So I just sort of want to recap for you that we have this large overview of how to sort of, we're going to come up with some recommendations about what we can do to change public hearings to make them a little more engaging and address some of the issues that people found that they had in them. And at the same time, we know that Bill 44 is sort of putting some pressure on our municipalities to change the way that we're doing engagement right away, as well as to do OCP work. And so this is why we wanted to dig in a little bit to what we're doing with the assembly work, but also what we're seeing in New Westminster around doing online engagement and going directly to third reading. And Amina's trying to log in by phone, so thank you so much for listening to all of this. Maybe we can take some questions if you have them.
Yes, absolutely. And we've been trying madly behind the scenes to make that connection, but we're still having technical difficulties connecting with Amina. Thank you very much for the presentation. I will just, before I start, I see Councillor Murray's hand, but just before I go, I'm going to go to Mr. Milburn here just to talk about the state of public hearings, if I may. And so, yes, we have had significant substantive provincial legislation that's come down, and it alters when public hearings are going to be applied. Largely, I'm being a little bit, and you know, I'm not giving enough specific information, but largely it is if the zoning matches the official community plan, it's unlikely to have a rezoning process with a public hearing. If you have to alter or amend the official community plan, then there is a prescribed public hearing process. And then there's also other non-density housing bylaws that the council reviews from time to time, and we do seek public input in a variety of ways for those as well, but they are not affected by the new legislation. So I was just going to go to Mr. Milburn. How do you think that this legislation, about how many public hearings do you figure we're going to be doing going forward with this new legislation in place? Do you have any guesstimate about that?
Yes, Your Worship, be happy to provide a little bit of feedback for council and members of the viewing audience. The provincial government introduced a new legislation called Bill 44, and that was introduced in late November and actually received royal assent. This is provincial legislation that changes the fundamental rules around how local government engages with the community. And in particular, the legislation specifies that as of royal assent, so as the time the legislation came into effect, for bylaws that had not already received first reading, so all new bylaws that were coming before council, that were rezoning land for residential purposes. Either the entire lot was being rezoned, or if it was a mixed use project with at least 50% of the floor area being residential. In those circumstances, local governments in British Columbia are now prohibited from holding a public hearing. There is a public notification requirement still required in advance of first reading of the bylaw. So there is notice, and then most communities, of course, will receive written feedback, but the province has indicated that there will be no ability of local governments, and they'll be prohibited from hearing directly from the public in the form of a public hearing. So this means that really the vast majority of bylaws that come before this council in the last 10 years have been, rezoning bylaws have been for residential purposes. Almost every development in the district of residential land is going to trigger essentially this issue, and there will be prohibited public hearings. Now, I should mention a couple caveats. One, as the mayor already mentioned, this only applies to bylaws that are consistent with the official community plan. So if there is an amendment at the same time to the official community plan, then it is actually mandatory for a public hearing to be held. Additionally, I mentioned residential rezonings. If there is any other type of rezoning, and if it's consistent with the official community plan, so this would be to a commercial industrial zone, for example, then it's actually council's discretion whether or not to hold a public hearing in that circumstance. By convention, council has held public hearings in most circumstances. I would say in very rare circumstances, public hearings have not been held. So I would say the majority of all bylaws coming forward to council may be prohibited, as many are consistent with the OCP, but essentially have a residential component that would trigger a prohibition.
It's about 10 public hearings a year.
The clerk may have a better number off the top of the head. I'd say 10 to 15, yes.
10 to 15, okay. Just to get an order of magnitude of what we're talking about here for this. And so it doesn't sound like it's something that is happening at every single meeting. Therefore, it could be something that you spend more time and resources preparing for, but also it's occurring fairly regularly still anyway. First speaker I have out of the gate, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Little. I have some comments and some questions. Are you okay with that? Is my time started?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. You remind me of a process with your presentation, what you did with Gibson's, of the process that we used nearly 15 years ago in regards to our own OCP. We had hors d'oeuvres here at the hall to get people in. We had theater sports come out and provide entertainment to get people in. Because the challenge around creating an official community plan, OCP, which sort of sets the stage for the future, is getting people involved. And we spent a lot of money on it. I think we got a grant of $500,000 from the province to go through this very extensive process to ask people what they thought about plans for our community. And it was one of the largest engagement processes that we've ever had. And it was very successful, I think. What we're talking about with public hearings right now, and that process went on for months. It was a very intense process to gather all this information. you know, if we were to apply this format to every application that we had, you know, it would be longer than the public hearings that have just been banned by the province. I'm not sure that they would be supportive of that. What's happened over the years is that public hearings, and I think most of it has been triggered with the fact that, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we all used to have a newspaper land on our front doorstep 3 times a week. It was our local paper, and many municipalities had that, and many of those municipalities have lost that regular communication. You could determine the direction of a council or decide the outcome of a council by the articles that would be written about municipal politics in our local North Shore News. I think that's changed a lot. There's 4,000 ways to get information now. The paper lands on our doorstep once a week. Not everybody reads the Sun of the Province. Maybe they don't watch the news anymore. And so getting information out to the community is becoming more challenging, and the interest has waned a lot as well. Public hearings are quasi-judicial. We're like a judge and a jury, and they have saved a lot of things. The Spetafor lands in the valley were one of the largest public hearings in British Columbia history. We ran one, Coven Mountain Forest, had 1,200 people show up. It did change the direction of land use from housing up on that mountain in the Seymour to a park that we enjoy right now, protecting the trails. So in my opinion, they're very, very important. The province feels that they're onerous, and the development community feels that they're onerous because of the costs and the time. I think it's both of those are, you know, when you're talking about a $20 or $30 million development project, you know, 100,000 for a public hearing process in a couple of months is a small price to pay to hear from your electorate. We as politicians, certainly, I'll take my 2 minutes. We as politicians certainly want to hear from you when we're campaigning. When we're running for office, we'll make time for you all day long. But then when it comes down to making decisions, well, and if you disagree with our decisions, our direction or intent, maybe that might be a different process.
Councillor, we are in a workshop, so I'll come back to you.
No, I'm just going to finish here.
Okay.
I just have 30 seconds. I would say that I'm in favor of online, being able to attract people online to take part in a process. We've seen developers stack public hearings for years. We had one hearing where every single person that spoke was connected to the development industry. There was one person in the community that was not. I think there's a lot of work to do in regards to giving democracy back to our community and not taking it away, which is what I think the province has done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. You know, I requested that we bring you in for this meeting and workshop because we want to ensure that the public is still being heard on every level. And we've got to also ensure that it's inclusive, reflects the broader community, and not just the people who have shown up for public hearings in the past. So I'm very interested in all the work you've done. The New Westminster Online, what was the outcome of that online engagement? Was it felt that it was effective?
Thanks for that question. I can't give away all the details because we just got the final report today about that. But I will say that it has been ongoing for a number of years. There is it's a public engagement platform that the City of New Westminster uses for a lot of their engagement. So there is a way for people to engage, and they layered in land use engagement as well onto it. So it has been a bit of a trial for them. And now they're just in the place where they're going to assess and adapt and improve whatever they need to at this point. But there is a full report coming very shortly about that.
You don't want to venture into the waters of saying what your take on it was?
No, I
No,
don't.
okay, all right, that's fine.
And they haven't had a chance to read the report yet, so.
We can maybe just highlight kind of like what we said, that it's not necessarily like a solve all, but it does definitely offer a really powerful, useful tool to connect with and get feedback from folks who might not previously have been able to provide feedback. But yeah, it doesn't solve everything with engagement, but we think there's some really really strong use case for having that online engagement.
And you felt that the Be Heard software was the best for that, did you?
I don't know that we evaluated other software tools. We just evaluated how it's going in New Westminster.
Okay. And I was also curious about Gibson's and what was the outcome for that? And you said that report's on its way as well, but what was the cost of that? And how has council responded to that so far there?
Yeah, we're just putting together the final financial pieces around this, and that will be available as well in our final report. I will say that mayor and council they voted unanimously to do this, and it is a piece of the overall OCP engagement. It is not the only engagement, but it was to create some recommendations. So the assembly came up with a set of recommendations that are based in values that they identified were really important in the community for them, against types of housing that they felt that they could really, that met all of their values. And so those recommendations are going to council, and staff are bringing it as a motion to create a binding recommendation, which is not commonly done, but the town of Gibson seems to be really engaged in this process. And then their consultant who's doing the rest of their OCP work is using this to kick off the OCP work.
And what was the cost of the residents' assembly?
Yeah, we don't have our final costs yet. So we had 25 participants, and it's somewhere in the $90,000 range to do this with them.
And that was just on that one, which was a very broad issue, but the one issue of housing.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing a residence assembly for every piece of land use. Like, it wouldn't replace every public hearing, but in order to do those sort of broader topics like an official community plan, it can be really helpful because those folks really engaged and understood land use issues, trade-offs that are required, the financial impacts of housing and the values around the community, and could really look at it from a really big view of that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just hearing, sorry, we're chatting with Amina since she's unable to connect. She's sending us a few notes. And so I'll just read her response in terms of the Be Heard website. She has a few more details that we can share. So first, she said that the primary goal of the online engagement platform is to facilitate the participation of community members who are both affected by a proposed bylaw change and who may have faced barriers in asking questions or providing feedback in other forums. The online engagement platform is available 24 hours a day and gives participants the flexibility to post questions, take surveys, or give feedback whenever it works for them. It also does not have capacity issues that involve lengthy queuing processes and delays depending on how many other people are participating in the engagement. An internal report on the platform's user profiles undertaken by the City of New West in February 2023 found that households with children were overrepresented on Be Heard with a 31% representation when compared to the 2021 census profile of 20%.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you? You're going so fast.
Sorry.
I'm really not getting it all. And I'm really curious about what you just said about the households with children, because we don't see them here very often either. And
Absolutely.
So can you repeat that, but slow down, please?
Sorry, I'm reading it out, so I'm a faster reader than I think I am a speaker. But yes, the good news is that with that flexibility on that online platform, we did see a significant over-representation of families with children. So 31% on the Be Heard website compared to the 2021 census, which had 20%. In the community. So it's really showing us that this open access times are facilitating the participation of parents who wouldn't be able to attend in person or fixed time engagements, such as public hearings or even the assembly model, so that's where, having different kinds of models overlapping and offering different channels of participation can create those opportunities where, speaking as a parent myself, I wouldn't be able to necessarily attend an assembly for 6 weekends in a row, but the online engagement platform might give me a better access. Yeah. And that I might just mention is just one of those profiles. And then so we've looked at the different demographics. We don't have all the data to show right now, but definitely showing that there's greater representation for different parts of the community.
And sorry, just noting, Amina's also just noted, as she's sending us notes, that the translation services offered through the platform makes it more accessible to a more diverse audience. So folks are able to get the information in all languages, which Google Translate can provide. But the current system, there does need to be more testing with the translation ability, and the city is looking at approaches to promote awareness of for more linguistically diverse audiences.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Back.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you very much for the presentation. This is definitely an area that I'm most interested in. And I noticed that one of your partners is City Hive, and I know that they were very much involved with the North Shore Young Civic Forum, which I have supported since it began. And it's all about engaging younger people in our community and getting them involved in local government. And some of the recommendations, like around the childcare piece, for instance, was part of their final report in their first go around with that as well. So yeah, very interested in seeing, if there's anything here that we might be able to implement. I know, we are doing a number of these things already, but can we expect a final report? You mentioned that, and will that have some more specific recommendations and ideas?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, our final report is due to be out around the end of June, and that will come with a set of recommendations and with more details so that councils can make really informed decisions about what will work for them. Some of those recommendations may go to like the province as well to be looking for support for municipalities, but we're really looking at a lot of local change that could happen.
That's fantastic. And I look forward to receiving that so that we can get some real tangible things that we might be able to use here in the District of North Vancouver. And I think it's always been important that we, provide access to the public process, like public hearings, and they have been limiting and had their challenges. But look forward to receiving those recommendations and seeing what we can do to help. And particularly as public hearings will not be permitted in a lot of cases now, we need to do more than ever to look at other ways to engage with people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Back.
Can we just note that?
Councillor Mah. Oh, sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
to note
Claire
that
Adams.
just to note that the final report will contain more information around that financial analysis, the Be Heard evaluation, work we've done on jurisdictional signage and a jurisdictional scan, and final recommendations on assemblies as well. Thanks.
And those final reports will be broadly disseminated in the public or directly to the participants first?
Yeah, they will go out to the folks who participated with us, but they will be available on our website as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think as a council, we have said that we want to increase the level of engagement from the community, especially since the voter turnout in the last election was a meager 23%. I think, we all want to hear from the public because, we're elected to represent the public. So prior to being on council, I was really involved with my community association for probably about over 20 years. And when there were issues of concern, we organize. That to me is, is still an element of our democracy where, people that have similar issues, if they band together, maybe they have a louder voice. Now, as an elected official, I want to hear all opinions, not just the loud voices. And that speaks to the equity that you talked about. So I do support that. When I look at your presentation, I like the residents' assembly model, but it does seem like a big commitment. You talk about 5 sessions, 6 hours per day. I'm going to ask you to comment on that after, when I just finish quickly. At the same time, I know that a lot of people have busy lives now. There's a lot of things on our plate, and sometimes people just want to send a simple email. I get phone calls, or I get a request to meet with people in the community. I think that's still an element of engagement that we don't necessarily want to lose out on. So, in the end, I think ultimately we want a lot of options for people to engage, and each approach has value, and it is a form of engagement. So my question back is, one, if you can speak a bit about the resident assembly model, and second, maybe comment on where some of the more traditional means of reaching out to council fits into this new model or potential new model. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Nicole, do you want to respond to that since you've done some work on the assemblies?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the model itself, so as you mentioned, the diversity is the one piece that I think the model is the strongest at, the assembly model, in terms of really getting basically a mechanism to monitor and then ensure you have demographic representation of the whole community. The length of time is definitely the biggest drawback because it does create, in some ways, a barrier to participation in terms of who is able to join on that particular day and time. And for that length of time, it does require certain commitment from the public. Although, as we've seen in Gibson's and other places where the model is being used, folks tend to be really committed to it. Folks who do register an interest tend to really value the opportunity to represent their community. They take it really seriously. And so that's really strong interest. I feel like it kind of counterbalances some of the costs and the burdens of that participation. We've also used different models of honorariums in different municipalities that can help and just kind of offset some of the financial barriers to committing so much time. And so in Gibson's, I believe all participants, correct me if I'm wrong, Trudy, all participants received an honorarium. In Burnaby, I believe it's being done in an opt-in model. So folks who are facing financial barriers can indicate that. New Westminster is doing a model where anyone who I think is missing time from work can receive an honorarium, and so that can support that. And the reason why that length of time is really important for this particular model is we're asking folks to really dig into an issue, and so instead of kind of one of the weaknesses of the public hearing process where folks are kind of speaking towards council, not necessarily receiving a response and not necessarily getting to hear and respond to each other's perspectives, whereas we really get that dialogue approach in an assembly model where people are able to actually have a conversation, present different perspectives, and then work together, collaborate on developing some recommendations and ideas that integrate different perspectives instead of just having kind of the loudest voice in the room having more of attention. And I'm just going to quickly check our chat here in case that there's a few other comments, but Trudy or Amina Trudy or Claire, feel free to jump in as well if you have something to add.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I think the other part of that question was around just more engagement in general from the community and how to get people to engage. And I think that falls a little bit outside of the scope of this project because we were specifically looking at public hearings, but none of this is to replace other ways that folks can engage with delegations, being able to write to their counselors, come have you talk at their residence meetings or coffee meetings or whatever it is. Like there's still so many opportunities for engagement, and all of that is really necessary to have that sort of robust engagement within our communities, I think, as well.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further speakers, but I was just going to say, there isn't a specific recommendation at the end of this, but Mr. Milburn, perhaps you can talk about what opportunities are coming down the road to look at how we engage. So we obviously have to have an OCP produced or amended to comply with the provincial regulations. We'll have a new form of public hearings coming up potentially. What do you see as the opportunities to make these kinds of to consider these kinds of changes?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, for the opportunity to comment. So as you note, the provincial legislation I mentioned earlier, Bill 44, also sets out a requirement for most local governments in British Columbia, including the district, to update their official, first, their housing needs reports by the end of this year, which will include public engagement and engagement with various interested parties, such as our partners, such as local Indigenous communities and our neighbors in the local jurisdictions, as well as nonprofit housing providers and others who are involved in the production of housing. That will be followed by an official community plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment before the end of 2025. And I think this fits nicely with the presentation in the sense that there are lots of innovative ways that we can engage with our community at that, as they described it, upstream. So early in the process. And I think these key updates will be opportunities to apply these kinds of techniques to ensure we have really good and robust feedback from the community. Because at the end of that process, council is being mandated to identify through OCP and zoning 20 years worth of housing growth and to have that approved. And then to do that again every 5 years thereafter. So this will be a regular process of updating at the official community plan level, at that high level policy level, and having really good, robust engagement using some of the various techniques. We've heard some examples tonight. These and others will be needed for us to provide and hear from the community in a really comprehensive way.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. Right, I see no further speakers on the matter. Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate you sharing this information with us, and look forward to seeing the final reports in these various areas. I'm sure they'll be of great interest to us as we modify our programs going into future public engagement. So receipt is moved by Councillor Muri. Is there a second for receipt? Second by Councillor Ma. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. All right, that takes us on to our second item of the evening, which is item 3.2, Spirit Trail Eastern Extension Update. And let staff get into position here. Welcome, Mr. Devine and Mr. Carney. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, I think Peter's going to say a few words off the top.
Thanks, Shane. So good evening, council. For members of the public, my name is Peter Cohen and I'm the Director of Engineering Services here with the district. I'm joined this evening by Shane Devine, who is our Senior Project Manager dedicated to the project, as well as Natara Haywood, who is our Assistant Project Manager on the project, as well as Steve Carney, who oversees our Regional Transportation section. Before I hand over to Shane and the team to walk you through the presentation, I just wanted to spend a quick moment to help set some context for this evening. Our work on the Spirit Trail to extend from Maplewood to Deep Cove was brought forward by council last year, around 12 months ago, as part of the financial plan deliberations. As part of the discussions, council directed staff to progress and deliver the Spirit Trail extension over the next 5 years. Tonight's an opportunity for staff to share with you how things are progressing into that 5-year project. This is a workshop, and as such, you have no recommendation from staff nor decision needed from you this evening. However, effectively, what our ask is of council is for you to share whether you generally agree with our current strategy in moving this project forward. To help set the stage, please be mindful of the following. With this being a 5-year project, we do need to get shovels in the ground for the first phase within the next 12 months or so. In considering the various contexts along the route, staff have broken the project into a number of manageable segments. For more straightforward segments that have limited alternatives, such as those through forested areas, we are suggesting these to be the pieces that progress into implementation first. And for the more difficult segments, such as those with options that include residential neighborhoods, that these are planned to be implemented later in the project. And as Shane will share, we still have another 12 to 24 months to progress work through the planning efforts for these segments, which includes further engagement with those communities before a decision is needed in those spots. With that, I'll now hand over to Shane. He has a roughly 12 slides and will take around 10 or so minutes. So it'd be greatly appreciated for any detailed questions to be held to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Devine.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me tonight. My first time here, so if the sound's off or something, let me know. Tonight's presentation has 4 main sections. First, I'll provide a brief overview of the work we've accomplished in the year since the 2023-2027 capital plan was adopted, which provided staff with the direction to complete the Spirit Trail within that timeframe. Then I'll spend some time summarizing the key themes of what we've heard from the public in the past public engagement. That feedback has informed scheduling of the next steps. Importantly, the schedule includes time for more public engagement and additional touch points with council as routing decisions occur over time. Finally, we're looking forward to hearing from council at the end of the presentation. So we're almost exactly 1 year in out of the 5 years of this project. While nothing's been constructed yet, the team has been hard at work gearing up to deliver on council's direction. First, the team was resourced, as Peter said. Myself, Natara, and Steve Carney, the Sector Manager of Region Transportation, is here. We're also being supported by several other strong teams of the district, including transportation, parks, engineering operations, communications, and more. I'd like to say that we're grateful for collaboration from staff from Tsleil-Waututh Nation as well. Secondly, the team has been undertaking some early planning work. This includes mapping out many different viable routing options and facility types. We've also been working on planning a delivery strategy that enables on-time completion, minimizes cost, and maximizes time for more public engagement on the segments that need more of it. Finally, and as we'll get into in more detail in the next few slides, our work to date includes the first phase in a two-phase public engagement approach. So it's important to note that the public engagement that we've completed so far is just the start. Decisions have not been made, and there will be much more opportunity for the public to provide their informed input as the various routes are evaluated and designs are progressed. The first phase of the engagement approach, which is now completed, is what you see on this slide. It was a broad-based campaign to raise awareness of the entire Spirit Trail Eastern Extension, communicate where it could go and what it could look like. The most important part of that phase of engagement was to listen and learn to the public. It was to take early input from the public on routing and form prior to final decisions being made. Public engagement done so far has been successful in terms of listening and learning. We held 2 open houses, which were attended by 600 people. At the open houses, attendees placed 480 sticky notes on maps identifying risks and opportunities. That's what you see here on this slide. People also left 104 comment cards containing 180 distinct pieces of feedback. Furthermore, we've now received about over 135 inbound emails. And it's worth mentioning that these emails broadly align with the feedback we received during the open houses. Finally, staff had taken dozens of calls, as well as met with several individuals, group representatives, strata councils, business operators, and more. As I mentioned, this is just the start. Next phase of public engagement will be focused on individual segments rather than the overall Spirit Trail. And so it will take place at different times for different segments, but there will be more. Regarding what we've heard so far, feedback has consisted of a variety of perspectives, ranging from supportive to concerned. That feedback can be roughly summarized into the themes on the slide here. More detail about these themes, as well as comments themselves, can be found in the engagement summary report provided to council. While we don't have time tonight to go into every theme, we'd like to address a few of the most common topics that came up. Starting with the topic of different users sharing facilities, such as multi-use paths or local roads. This will and can be addressed through design once a route is chosen, with elements such as signage, traffic calming, improved sight lines to increase visibility amongst users. Furthermore, by improving the rest of the cycling network, such as planned improvements to Mount Seymour Parkway, it is expected that faster cyclists will be encouraged to stay on the more direct connections. Another common theme is that of using local roads as part of the Spirit Trail. It's critical to note that local roads can be made safe for a fraction of the cost as compared to busier roads. And given our budget constraints, it is responsible to consider local roads as an option at this stage of planning. Similarly, in some cases, the costs can be substantial to make trail improvements safe, wide enough, and accessible to a variety of users. Some with this concern have expressed that the Spirit Trail was never contemplated as being on local roads and should only follow forested pathways. While it is true that forested route options have many benefits and are being considered, in some locations, those options do not exist. In other locations, there could be substantial tree and habitat loss impacts. Simply put, there is no way for council to completely avoid the use of local roads to make the Spirit Trail connection from Seymour River to Deep Cove. given the budget constraints. Regarding the topic of new volumes of people coming to neighborhoods, it's important to note that the Spirit Trail Eastern Extension is a facility to help locals get to the places they need to go, like schools, parks, and shopping centers. Also, there is not expected to be an unmanageable increase in pedestrian or cycling volumes in any of the proposed locations. Schedule. Just before we speak about the schedule, here we have the overall route map. You'll notice this map was updated after the April 30th report was submitted, and that's because we wanted to show a new option that was submitted by the public as it merits consideration. That's E and F on the screen.
And A.
And D.
A as well,
Yeah.
right?
E, F, D, and A. Yes. We, Yep. Yeah, we have a larger version at the back as well. We've got the full screen. So maybe we should all get a copy of that. Sure. No, we can definitely do that. Some of the ideas on this map are from earlier Spirit Trail planning, specifically the 2013 Spirit Trail planning report. It's important to note that this report is not being treated as a rule book and is not being relied upon for decision making. It simply informs some of the work we've done. No, this map is informed by 2013, partially informed by some of the 2013 work. Other ideas shown have been generated by staff, our consultants, as well as several, as we spoke about, submitted by the public during the first phase of public engagement. Another takeaway from this map, again, is how many local connections the Spirit Trail has the potential to make. It can and will enable safe and comfortable active travel for locals and improve equitable access to nature for people with varying abilities. On this slide, we're showing the schedule for the entire Spirit Trail Eastern Extension. During the first phase of public engagement, we heard from many who are very interested in the outcome and have a desire for more engagement. That's shown here. As you can see, more engagement is planned. This segment by segment delivery approach also allows staff to meet council's intended timelines. Moving on, I'll discuss each segment in a little bit more detail, starting with Seymour River to Windridge Park. I recognize there's lots of information on this slide, but the key points to take away are that this segment will be ready for construction first, completing in 2025. It extends from the current terminus of the Spirit Trail near Superstore at Seymour Boulevard and extends to Windridge Park near Ice Sports. It does include a short new multi-use path near Kenneth Gordon Maplewood School, but it represents good value for money as most of the segment leverages existing infrastructure using local roads and improved existing paved paths. Finally, moving forward with this segment does not preclude any of the other options for the remaining segments. The next segment that would be ready to proceed to design and construction is the Roche Point Trail. Staff are proposing for this segment to consist of both the routes shown. The key takeaways for this slide are that this two-pronged segment makes several important connections between Parkgate, Ravenwoods, Garibaldi, Sherwood Park, Dollarton Village, and Whale-Witch and Kates Park areas. Improving safe and accessible routes to school is important, as is making a connection to Whale-Witch and Kates Park. Staff believe that not making a connection to Whale-Witch would be a major lost opportunity, as it is a regional destination that needs more options for folks to get there without their car. We've also heard from Tsleil-Waututh members and staff that improving comfortable access to Whale-Witch is a top priority because of its cultural, spiritual, and recreational significance. The investment required for much of the segment is low, especially on the steeper section of Roche Point Drive because of the low speeds and volumes there. These savings are expected to be better used on safety improvements on Dollar Road and a new crosswalk at Roche Point Drive and Dollarton Highway. This segment through and adjacent to Whale-Witch will be ready to progress at about the same time as Roche Point Trail, with completion targeted in 2025. Importantly to note for this segment is that Anchor Trail within the park will remain as gravel, pedestrian focused trail open to off-leash dogs as it is today. It will not be lit and any widening will be minimal. We know that it's important to all stakeholders that environmental disturbance and tree loss is absolutely minimized. While cycling is permitted today along Anchor Trail and it will remain to be, it is anticipated that cyclists will be encouraged to stay on Dollarton as a result of the proposed improvements on Dollarton Highway between Roche Point Drive and Dollar Road. Building these parallel routes enables the Spirit Trail to remain accessible to a wide set of users. Now we move on to more challenging segments. This segment connecting Woodridge Park to the Parkgate Village area is complex and targeted completion is 2027, which provides staff more time to complete the technical work needed to support evaluation of these routes. Next year, staff will be able to provide more information to council about these routes, estimated costs of the bridge crossings, and the results of more public engagement with this community. A key takeaway for this segment is that there is 1 year scheduled before a decision needs to be taken about which route the Spirit Trail should take in this area. And last, but certainly not least, the segment connecting to Deep Cove has the most time before a final decision needs to be made about the route. There are many viable alternatives to make a connection to Deep Cove, and it seems we're adding options almost every week at this pace. For example, as I mentioned earlier, during the first phase of public engagement, we heard the public would like to add a connection between Parkgate and Deep Cove to be considered alongside the other options. All of the options shown have their pros and cons, but they will all be evaluated with equal consideration. You'll notice the schedule shows a pause or a gap over the next year as we focus our time and efforts on the preceding segments. This leaves plenty of time for what we expect to be a significant amount of additional public consultation with this community. And that brings us to some time to hear from council. I'd like to highlight that the schedule has a lot of time for future council touch points, as you'll see on the slide here. And those will be specifically to talk about the two more complex segments. So to best use tonight's time, we would suggest that council focus feedback on the first three segments and reconfirm that staff can proceed as planned. That's the end of my presentation this evening. Thank you, council.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so having participated in the in-person public meetings in the process, and also obviously getting a lot of people sending communications through my email. You know, one of the things that I'm seeing repeated over and over again, and, you know, I know it's addressed in the report, is this issue of the utilization of single-family roads versus parks. And I note that in your report, it says that none of the routes can be entirely achieved without using some of those single-family roads rather than just entirely forest trails, which is fair. But you know, if you're looking to minimize that, and I think that was the original intent of the Spirit Trail, you know, we're not achieving all of the objectives in the Spirit Trail. It was intended to be at waterfront. It was intended to be all ages accessible throughout. It was intended to not have to go up dramatic rises. But the question still remains, what route minimizes reliance on single-family roads? It would seem to me that if you can get as far as so the western portion of the Windridge Park space, that seems fair the way that it is, but you see that blue A of the ABC in the central part there. You know, I get that ideally we don't want to cross the parkway if we could avoid it. But the city's crossing major roads, West Van's crossing major roads. We cross major roads down at Lower Cap as well. So it's not insurmountable. It would seem to me that blue A leading to the new options of E and F on the gold or greenish, whatever you want to call that color. It would seem to me that would be the most direct route to the Cove. And it would probably have the highest ratio of forest trails versus residential streets. I note that you would no longer be going to Kate's Park in the trip, and that would obviously be something that that some of the other routes include. But what are your comments on that as a route, getting north of the parkway and staying north of the parkway using switchbacks and forest trails to get us as directly to the cove as you can?
Can we take this?
I can comment on this. A and E and F all have merits, I think. It's just too early to really start to evaluate them without doing some additional work on both of those options. So, like I said, there's pros and cons to E and F and A. But right now, none of them are rising above the other before we do more technical work.
So when can we expect like, it's hard to give comment on the first section if we don't know whether it's going to lead to anything. And so when will we get additional information on E and F as routes in the process?
Over the course of the next about 24 months, but so the northern alignment near Northlands Golf Course, that can conceivably connect to Roche Point Drive and down to Roche Point Trail, and create a viable Spirit Trail connection as well. So just in 1 year, if council were to select A, it doesn't preclude also having the Whale-Witch and Kate's Park connection.
Okay, well, for my part today at this point, I do think we need to explore that northern route, that just simply to say, you know, if we were to maximize forest trail versus residential streets, these probably would be the routes you'd have to consider. This is what the cost implications would have to be, and also what the environmental impact would be, because you obviously would have to clear. There's places where switchbacks don't exist in that area. Some are on road, but some are new trails. So I do think that should be a part of the discussion. And for my part, it's harder for me to give other comments on the other spaces until I know whether that's viable or not. So at this point, that's my preferred option for further exploration. Next, I've got Councillors Hanson back and Ma. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and for all the work that we're doing on this important community initiative. When I think of a spirit trail, I think of something that's going to exist for generations, be enjoyed by North Vancouverites for a long time to come. So I think it's really important we try and get it right. And when I think of a spirit trail, if possible, I think of something through the forest, something that shows off the nature of Seymour, which is so much a part of who we are, not necessarily something that runs along suburban streets with a signpost as being our trail. Today, I took the time in the morning to walk from Northlands, essentially along the Route A, somewhat different, but in that vicinity, and then through E. And for my part, I thought that was a very viable alternative to consider. It's extremely beautiful. The topography is, from my point of view, acceptable. Now, I appreciate there's some issues of steepness, and we'll have to consider those and weigh that. But like Mayor Little, I'm very interested in pursuing an option that goes north, that avoids the built-up areas, that, in my view, leads to less potential community overcrowding on some of these streets and busyness, and which I think could produce, at least based on what I understand of the matter, a spectacularly beautiful classic trail, and as Mayor Little has pointed out, the shortest point between those 2 points. And I know that we were asked today to comment on the Roche Point Trail and the Whale-Witch connection point. But if in fact it's possible to create this beautiful forested trail right across the north, then we perhaps wouldn't create these other trails and create this increased population and density and use of these areas in the south east of the district. So I wonder if it isn't premature for us to be weighing in on Roche Point and the Way-O-Witchin connection. As to the first component, Seymour River to Windridge, that would seem to be obvious, and I won't have any further comment on this at this time. But like Mayor Little, I would like far more information with about the route that's as forested as possible, that separates the users of what I hope will be a beautiful trail from our community, and which from my point of view has the potential to highlight the very best features of our community, which is that trail across the north through Seymour. So thank you very much.
Councillor Back.
Thank you, Mayor Little. First of all, I just want to acknowledge all of the work, an incredible amount of work actually that staff have done just in the last year since this council made a commitment to get the Spirit Trail link to Deep Cove in our 5-year plan. And I still remain really excited about the opportunity to see Spirit Trail advance and for the many benefits that it will provide. And I agree with Councillor Hansen. I really see this as a legacy project, something that I look forward to being proud of for the rest of my life here in the District of North Vancouver, and all the benefits that it will provide for residents, for businesses, and for visitors in the years to come. I had the opportunity just this morning to get out and experience many of the different sections that are being proposed along the Eastern Extension route. And it really opened my eyes to some of the opportunities and some of the challenges. So in terms of our decision point here tonight, fully support the Seymour River to Windridge Park section. But I want to emphasize that I think if we don't have a link to Way-O-Witchin Kates, it will be a hugely missed opportunity. I think that particular park is such an important part of our community, to the Tsleil-Waututh community. It's actually one of the most beautiful parts of the route as well through Roche Point Trail. So I would hate to see that not move forward. And I think that obviously that links to Way-O-Witchin Kates Park section as well. I certainly hear the concerns from residents, and I've met with some of the residents who are here tonight about their concerns of how it will impact their street. And I want to acknowledge that I think in the information sessions that were held, people really just wanted to get a clear sense of what this trail was going to look like on their street. And I fully appreciate that. I would want to see that as well. But I know the approach the staff was taking, and that, we couldn't go out there with fully detailed designs until we had some initial feedback from the community. And I think now we have heard that. And I just want to acknowledge that, there is still a lot of time to work out how we will approach the section leading into Deep Cove. And I hope very much that residents are a part of that process. But right now, I want to say that I do support the direction that this is going, and as I say, I do want to see it go south through Kates, yeah, those are sort of my. I guess just I want to address some of the other things I've heard as well. One being that this trail is going to be a huge draw. And there's no question that people are going to come from other parts of the region to enjoy this, just like they enjoy our parks in the district. But I don't see this as being, the sort of draw that a Stanley Park seawall is, for instance. It really is going to be, I think, used by members of the community, neighbors to commute, to use recreationally. But I don't actually envision it being the sort of trail where people are going to come and park their car and we're going to see, huge influxes of people on bikes. Not that I think that's a bad thing, but from the point of view of local residents, I think this is going to be less of a draw than maybe they think. But those are my initial comments. Thank you.
Very much. Councillors Ma and Pope. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I read a lot of emails and letters on this topic, and last Thursday, I wrote part of the possible routes with staff. I will admit that it was on an e-bike. I also met with some local residents who gave respectful feedback about their concerns, so I want to thank them for that. Shane, as you mentioned, and I acknowledge there are many options for routes. However, I feel that the initial segments may inform the later segments, so I want to make sure we keep all options available. Trail, subject to technical and budget considerations, to lead to both Weyowitchin to the south and Deep Cove through the north. If we're throwing out routes, potentially coming up Plymouth and across Strathaven, take the northern route, pass Parkgate, potentially a hard south turn, and an option to go north, potentially there. That way we get the benefit of, riding through some of the nicer trails on the north side, avoid some of the neighborhood routes on the south of the parkway. That's just potentially one idea if we're throwing out routes. But overall, I support the work on trying to complete the Spirit Trail. I thank the community and all other groups for their input and for the staff for their hard work. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Ma. Councillors Pope and Murray. Councillor Pope, your comments, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your hard work as well. I also rode the Spirit Trail this morning on the south routes, as well as and came back on the north route. That was arduous, to say the least, going up the hill from Deep Cove up to, linking with the north side of the trail. I couldn't do it on my e-bike even. So I really have my doubts about using any of that section, because I just don't think people will use it. If I can't use it on an e-bike, I can't see anyone else using it either. But really, I want to confine most of my comments to what's in front of us tonight, which is just giving you the okay to move forward with Seymour to Windridge Park. Yes, absolutely. That seems like it's a pretty easy one. And the Roche Point connection down to Kate's Park, I too feel this is a critical connection. We know that it is a hugely popular park, and that many people in the community will be able to use a multi-use bike path or multi-use path to get there in the future. One of the other things I noticed cycling today that I was so impressed by was that what it does to have that down through Roche Point and at bottom of the golf course and through the trees in there it's not only just beautiful and spectacular, but it also links up with elementary schools and the high school. And so people who live in Parkgate could actually commute on the bike with their kids going down to the elementary school, which I think is absolutely ideal. And not just Parkgate, as you say, it's like all those other communities surrounding as well. So it gives a link that, we tend to think of this so much in terms of, just your average everyday cyclist out there. And we really don't think in terms of the kids and the families that could use it more. And that's where I see one of the enormous benefits of this connection through this particular section with Roche Point down to Kate's Park. And I don't see it excludes any other option. So I'm very supportive of pressing forward. I would hate to see any kind of pause put on this project at this point, because it's been around since 2010. We paused it, or the district paused it back then. And here we are again, 14 years later. We've got funding, we've got interest, we've got excitement. It's time to move forward with it. And it'll be such a huge positive to the community that I see absolutely no reason for delaying anything at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pope. Councillor Murray.
Winding its way along our scenic waterfront, the North Shore Spirit Trail is a fully accessible 35-kilometer greenway that will extend from Horseshoe Bay to Deep Cove. That was the original spirit of the Spirit Trail. West Van can't achieve theirs because of Marine Drive coming out of Horseshoe Bay and the grades that they would have to achieve. Our grades are hard enough. Theirs are like vertical. They're on a cliff. We're on a mountain. After we listened and learned at the public input, what changed from what was presented?
Through your worship, we added A near Northlands and E and F. We added a segment on North Dollarton Highway, and one other that I'm forgetting. We added a bunch of routes effectively is what we heard, and we took that feedback, and that will also inform detailed design, what the trails actually end up looking like.
Is it going to be a fully accessible path?
Through your worship, I think generally speaking, the industry would define fully accessible as paved. And so if that's the definition, I would say, no, we don't expect to fully pave the entire path. I believe it'll be context sensitive in the sense that we understand that there's ecological sensitivities. And so there will be segments that remain gravel and likely unlit as well. And so by those definitions, not fully accessible.
So would it be fully accessible from a human perspective?
Well, the other aspect of accessibility is grades. We know that grades are a challenge in North Vancouver. We're very aware of that, and we spend quite a lot of time looking at the contour map of the area. I can tell you that the 2013 Spirit Trail Planning Study recommended a maximum grade of 8% and up to an absolute maximum of 15 over short distances. Cliffmont Road, for example, reaches upwards of 20%.
What's Roche Point?
Roche Point is about 15%, and this is
The
approximately
Parkway?
the park.
Parkway?
13 degrees from below my house.
Yeah,
That's not one of the routes though.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
using it as an example.
13 degrees.
The section of Mount Seymour Parkway between Mount Seymour Road and Deep Cove Road is about around 13%.
Right.
So we have challenges both north and south of Mount Seymour Parkway. And so by those definitions, it's difficult to argue that the entire length of Spirit Trail will be fully accessible. Having said that, like our role really is to find really optimize the route and the treatment along that route.
How many trees will be taken out on the southern route?
Through your worship, we don't know yet. It's too early to say. We haven't done that technical work.
Okay. These are some of the questions that I need to know the answers to before I agree to any of this. I need to know the impact of our community. The southern route looks at a very significant amount, in my opinion, of trees that will need to come out to accommodate it, going through Roche Point Park, even going through Windridge and running a bridge across McCartney Creek. There's going to have to be significant tree removal to accommodate a bridge. And, we've built enough bridges on a mountain before. We know how many we have to take out and the kind of access points you need to clear in order to get machinery in there to drop a piece of infrastructure like a bridge. So the part of Windridge Park going over to Windsor Park is a significant, the crossing over McCartney Creek. You're not asking for any decision on that yet?
No, not tonight.
That's a good answer, because that's the most expensive part of this endeavor, from my opinion. I think, often in these projects, we look at the project in isolation of everything around it. And when we hear that, it probably won't be used by that many people going down to Kate's Park. Well, when you live in Deep Cove and when you live in Sherwood Park and you live next to Kate's, you know that every single day that it's sunny in the summer, on the long weekends, even in February when it's sunny, but it's minus 15, that's not the case. There are throngs of people coming to the area. And here we are adding another new piece of infrastructure to the area. I can support a trail connection to the Cove. And I would say We have more trail connections in Seymour than almost any other part of the North Shore. We have world-class trail systems. I would say that From is second. We have some of the largest draws for tourism and visitors to our area north of Mount Seymour Parkway. Quarry Rock, the Inlet, the kayak shop, a couple of them east of the Seymour. And we have challenges, and the infrastructure has not been put in place to accommodate those challenges. The Spirit Trail in West Vancouver to the city of North Vancouver, which is the flattest section of the trail. You park in Ambleside, you ride to Harborside, you park at Harborside, you ride to Ambleside. That's the route. The fear in the Seymour is that you will park at Kates Park and ride to the Cove. You park at the Cove and you will ride to Kates Park. And we're already dealing with, a significant increase in population. Have we done surveys on the volume? I mean, we're asking to run on the southern route to Kates Park and then run all traffic down 3 roads for the Spirit Trail. Where is the infrastructure that will support that in case people do show up, which I think is the intent, because I understand that this concept is also suggesting that this is going to replace the car. I don't believe that. I think there will be people that will be arriving by bike, but I think the volume of cars coming into the area will continue to increase. So I'll ask those questions and then I'll come around again.
I'd like to respond. I'm not sure if I can answer everything, but through your worship, I think just a comment in terms of infrastructure. To reiterate one of Shane's points from earlier, well, first, staff are really working within a number of constraints. We talked about topography, we talked about trees. Right-of-way is another challenge. Budget is a constraint for us. And so we're doing our best to balance all of these constraints and work within these constraints to really optimize, the trail and try and arrive at the best possible outcome. In terms of infrastructure, one of the benefits in using local roads is that it's very cost effective in the sense that we would not be building a lot of infrastructure. We wouldn't be removing parking. We wouldn't be building new paths behind curb, taking out vegetation. It would be light touch traffic calming, for example, reducing speeds to 30 kilometers an hour, some raised crosswalks, and some wayfinding signage. So that would be typical infrastructure for local roads. For other roads, say for instance, if it went along Dollarton Highway North, there, because speeds are higher, it's a arterial road, you've got more volume, higher speeds. There we could expect some infrastructure. And so the infrastructure for that would come through this program. That would be built within the next 5 years.
Yeah, so just, we're obviously talking about planning for the Spirit Trail specifically, but ultimately at the end of the day, we need to have a broader discussion about the whole trail network within the area generally. And it would seem to me that when you get to generally the Parkgate neighborhood, you could have a spur that takes you down to Kates Park. You could have the Kates Park Trail that goes straight into Kates Park, and you could have a route that goes into Deep Cove, and both with some kind of similar treatment to help you get back down to sea level. But because I actually agree with some of the comments made about access to Kates Park being an important deliverable. But most of that portion between Roche Point and Kates Park already exists. I ride it all the time. And so whether you're going to go through the Roche Point Trail to behind Sherwood Park Elementary School, or whether you're going to go down Roche Point Road and connect up with it, the vast majority of it is already there. And so it's largely going to be a wayfinding exercise. But I don't think you have to loop through Kates Park to get to Deep Cove. I think you could go direct to Deep Cove and then have a spur that takes you down to Kates Park and still achieve generally the same objectives through there. So it is a bit of a broader question about, how are we going to look at planning the trail network as a whole? I have another request from the Seymour or the Blue Ridge Community Association, which is to somehow produce a trail that's going to help people get from the Hyannis entrance points over to somewhere further east to tie them into Parkgate, because they want to spread out the parking access because too many people are going to Hyannis to turn around and enter the trail system up there. So there's other trail requests in the Seymour area that make sense in terms of just generally spreading out the traffic over a broader area and helping us with access points. The Blue A to the north, one of the benefits of that one is it means you don't have to cross two creeks with separate infrastructure. Those creeks are already crossed. And so it saves you the impact on those spaces. I think that you do need to connect up the piece. I know Councillor Murray is quite right. It's a steep ravine between Lionsgate Christian Academy, Plymouth Elementary, and Windsor. But I think you're going to have to connect that up somehow anyway, whether it's the lower route to Ellis or the upper route to Plymouth. It's a big divide in that community because McCartney Creek gets so deep in that canyon that I think you are going to have to produce a crossing there. But the other two crossings you could avoid by having a route around to existing infrastructure north of it. So just some further comments on it. Like I said, this is a very complex thing, and each person's imagining how they're going to use the space differently. But so I do appreciate staff's time and efforts into this. I did also want to say, and maybe I should reserve closing remarks, but I did want to say that one of the concerns that people had was that we weren't open or amenable to persuasion on different routes, that came to public meetings and thought, oh, the council's already made their decision and they're just informing us or something else like this. I really hope that going through this process, coming to the public meetings, coming to these meetings, you see, we're doing our best to listen to what the community wants to say. This is going to be the community's trail through this area. We're open and amenable to persuasion on different potential routes. And you see that both in our conversation here, you see that with staff's response to add additional routes as well. So I hope you're at least feeling well served on that, if I can't give you a definitive route today. But it is our goal to make this something that the community is very proud of and uses on a regular basis. I've got Councillors Murray, Forbes, and Ma. Councillor Murray. That's Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I must admit that I haven't actually traveled through a lot of these pathways. That's my plan for the end of the week and the weekend, so that I can understand better the grades, the driveways, the number of houses that this is scheduled to go past. I'm not locked into a southern route along the water the way this was originally planned. There are a number of reasons why. Something that hasn't been mentioned very much here, and being an accountant, one of my concerns is also cost. So I'm looking at that southern route and I'm thinking there's going extra 2 bridges, the winding and the weaving going through there, and the terrain, just the terrain. I actually would like to know more about the northern route, because I think whatever decisions we make, we have to make it as best we can, a whole picture, not in, I mean, the final decisions will be individual, but we have to look at the whole picture. And I think it's already been said that we have a lot of other problems with trailheads up at Hyannis. We know people will come. I don't think we can say they won't. Do we want to put that traffic going through neighborhoods, or do we want to look at a better use of our natural resources where cost savings might also play? And then I know that staff, you have to weigh that against people who don't want to lose any trees, and you're going to lose some trees depending on what happens. So I really appreciate the hard spot you're in. It's trade-offs to trade-offs to trade-offs, and it's very, very hard. But this is something, as somebody else has already said, this is going to be here for a long time, and we need to get it right right away. Otherwise, we may end up with a lot of mini deep cove scenarios going on these streets. So I'm not going to make a definitive decision tonight. I'm going to do all my walking and riding the end of this week and this weekend, and that will better inform me. Because at the moment, I just don't think I know this area well enough to be able to make a decision without actually going out there and walking the walk. So cost, if you can give any kind of comparison, even if you can't give exact costs, if you did a northern route versus a southern route. Now you've said the southern route, if it's on roads, it's traffic management demand basically and wayfinding. But is there any way you can give us a general idea if you were to put trails up in the north versus trails down?
Through your worship, just to clarify, you're speaking about the blue A northern route?
Yes.
Compared to the Bs and Cs
Yes.
for the blue
Yes.
ones. I think it's fair to say that most likely A would be less expensive than B or C because you don't need to build new
Bridges.
bridge crossings. I think
Right.
that's I'm not prepared to say much more than that. I'm not prepared to give magnitudes or scales or numbers right now, but it's fair given what we know. That being said, decisions need to be made on if we're to take on how much more width do you give to that trail? And that's a trade-off. And the wider you go, the larger the footprint, the more retaining walls you need, the more property impacts, private property impacts. So there's these trade-offs within the detailed design as well that really do impact cost. So it's hard to say, right, a gold-plated A could be more expensive than the cheapest version of C or B. But in general, I think you're on the right track.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is I don't want a gold-plated route. I want to save money. I want to do what's economical for the district. And I want to do what is appropriate for what the community wants. And so it doesn't have to be gold-plated. It just has to be, basically, I understand what you're saying about retaining walls and everything else, but Spirit Trail is kind of unique. It's not like any other trails that we kind of look at or any other kind of routes, bicycle routes that we look at in other areas of the district. This is really unique. It's really different. And it's a combination of all kinds of factors that we don't usually have to deal with. So as I say, I'll be walking and riding this weekend and looking at this, but I'm leaning, I don't see why we want to put in infrastructure on 2 creeks. And I would imagine that would be fairly expensive. So I just would like a little more detail about the northern route. And I think they all play off one another and we need to understand it better. And I've heard a lot from the community that they don't want it on their streets. So I'm going to walk the streets. So if you see me this weekend, come up and talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miri?
Well, I think Mayor Little, I agree completely with you that, we are also currently, our Parks Department is mapping the dark side off Indian River Drive. There's been a number of illegal trails built in there, and there needs to be some policies applied to that area to be able to deal with, the need to go further into the backcountry to, access trails to ride on. There is that conflict between hikers, dog walkers, and cyclists that we also have to look at. In Metro Vancouver, I sit on Metro Vancouver Parks, and I have for years. And, we look at those kinds of conflicts, and more municipalities throughout the region are looking at those kind of conflicts because there are so many more people coming into the park system that aren't used to it. I really think we need to look at the whole east of Seymour. And as the mayor's pointed out, Lake Whistler You know, when you ride the Valley Trail, you ride the Valley Trail, but then there's all sorts of little trails that go off of it, right? And, you know, we cannot accommodate sending all people that want to ride on the Spirit Trail down one trail to go from point A to point B, because you are concentrating too much volume in areas that are already negatively impacted by volume. You know, our tax rate this year is going up 7%. Our utility rates will be skyrocketing next year with the impact from the sewage treatment plant and future Metro Vancouver infrastructure projects that 3 million people will be paying for. So we have to be very cognizant of our taxpayers' dollars. As well as, and I've heard that, you know, the reverse route up F or E was a little steep. Well, it is a steep trail. It goes from Lima down to Deep Cove Road. There's a large piece of land in there that the district owns and a series of switchbacks up that hill. I would say that if you had done the route in reverse today and gone up Roche Point, you would have had the same result because the grade is as steep up Roche Point. You know, and nobody wants to pedal uphill. And that's where electric bikes come in. But I will tell you, I took part in a portion of the tour this morning with staff, and I left early and I went back from the Windsor Park. We did not start at Windridge, by the way. We started at Canland. So no one has actually seen the beginning of this trail. And at Burr Place, not that it was reported back to, at Burr Place, there's a number of seniors. It's a seniors facility, walk those little trails in and out, and we're going to be sending a significant amount of traffic by that building. And I think we need to be cognizant of the seniors. But I came back through the trail that we went through. There was a lady with a dog, a Vizsla, and she was throwing a ball. So I slowed right down on the electric bike. And then I came to where it tees, where you can go up to Lytton, or you can go straight on a little rough path past that, because I walk my dogs down there too. And as I came, the path kind of curves. And as I began to approach around the curve, 3 people stopped and one young man jumped back and almost burst into tears. I stopped immediately. The girl that was with him happened to be my niece, and she is an EA at the local high school. She was with one of her clients who had some, I believe, I don't want to generalize, but you know, there was a reason that he had an EA, and he was quite frightened by the fact that I'd come around this corner, and on a bike, you're coming around faster. So we have to be super cognizant of how we're implementing these facilities, how we're going to slow people down on electric bikes, how we're going to deal with that within the trail system, let alone the roads. Beachview is a straightaway. Baycrest is a straightaway. Roslyn is a straightaway, except for, you know, there's a couple little curves, corners, curves closer to Dollar. But those streets are wide and they'll be fast. That is not what we're trying to achieve by this. You know, this is meant to be a trail that anybody can access on certain points. And I think your suggestion of spurs that run off from different areas that we can implement that are more efficient, already there and less expensive is a solution, not running everybody down one single route.
I thought we were winding down, but I have a full slate of speakers again. So we are in a workshop. And so next I have Councillors Ma, Pope, Back, and Hanson. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I just want to bring up some additional observations I made during my ride. There were a lot of existing trails, you know, they weren't fancy, but there was some existing almost single track and some others where they were a little wider and paved. And what I look forward to is this Spirit Trail connecting those. And, you know, some of it probably wouldn't be that difficult as we noticed. You know, at the same time, we still need to ensure that any route that we pick is still usable or accessible by the current users on the route, whether they're casual cyclists, walkers, people with dogs, and runners. Like we also ran into quite a few people on there But that was the great part. There's a lot of people out there using it. In addition to providing routes for kids to school, because we went by a couple of schools and the golf courses and all that, it's quite wide. But one thing that I noticed is that there were a few businesses that we passed. I counted 4 coffee shops. And, if I'm taking a little trip riding, it's probably a nice slow pace, and I'll probably hopefully stop at those coffee shops. So that's something that we don't hear about, how this trail could also, support some local businesses. And, we talk about this being a bike path, but to me, this is more than a bike path. It's a great resource for everyone in the community. And it's an initiative, I believe, supported by TWN. So, I think I support this. I'm going to leave it to the engineers and the planners to come back with a route that will work and meet people's concerns. But I also support that we get going on the first part and the Roche Point Trail as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ma. Councillors Pope, Back, and Hanson. Councillor Pope, your comments, please.
I'm feeling the need to weigh in again because I'm not sure we're getting at what staff is asking us for here, which is to give them the go-ahead or not on the design and planning work and of the Windridge Park and the Roche Point Trail. So am I wrong in that? Do we need to provide you with more? Have you got any clear feeling on that so far?
Peter, I might pull you.
So through the mayor, I think what we're hearing is that there's general consensus for sure on the first segment, which is around Windridge and the likes as well. From my perspective, from staff, we're hearing a divided perspective as it relates to Parkgate, north of the Parkway, south of the Parkway, and that obviously has an implication on the Roche Point Trail. But if we're interpreting that incorrectly, please share that with us. The concept I'm taking away so far is a concept of spurs and what that looks like and the likes as well. So I think the first segment is clear to staff. We would solicit some further feedback in terms of the other couple of segments that we've asked for as well.
Okay, well, I'm very disappointed to hear that. I think we need to move forward and stay on track and not get sidelined by side issues and other things that are coming in another year and 2 years, because this Roche Point Trail is going to be phenomenal. And it's going to link so many neighborhoods and so many communities and kids and families. And yes, I too asked about the trees coming down and how much of a concern is that? And it's a huge concern to staff. And I'm convinced they would take every possible measure to limit it to as few trees as possible, or go around the older ones and take care of the park that way. I also note that I think it's important to understand that other jurisdictions are so far ahead of us on this, like decades. For example, the city of Vancouver, and the vast majority of bike facilities in the city of Vancouver are local street bikeways. They go past hundreds and thousands of homes. And you know what? People love it. They love it. But it was also the most opposed thing that was on the plate of the 2 previous councils ago and faced so much objection to it. But I just wanted to throw that out there and to also say, I think it's really important for everyone making a decision here to actually experience that pathway from the north side that goes down to Deep Cove, because to experience that on a bike is completely different than on a map here. It is so steep. It's completely out of the question, and will be. Like it?
All right, all right. We're gonna
Anyway,
Carry
so
on
there,
with council
those are my
comments.
comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pope. The next speaker I have is Councillors Back and Hanson. Councillor Back, your comments.
I guess, thank you, Mayor Little. I just want to come back to how I started. I see the Spirit Trail as being a legacy project, something that I can see generations benefiting from. And this is how these kind of projects get sidetracked. And I'm not dismissing anyone's concerns. I certainly want everyone to have input on which route is ultimately taken. But I'm disappointed as well that we can't seem to give staff sort of clear direction on a couple of sections tonight. And I want to also go back to Roche Point Trail. I think that's one of the most beautiful sections of this route. And again, I think just being able to have that connection to Kate's Park is so important. So I'm reiterating my support, but I would love to see others experience that for themselves and just see how important that part of the route is. I think what we're looking at here is something that many will benefit from, but today it is easy to look at it and it's hard to visualize what it can be. But I think it's something very, very positive, and I hope that we can come together rather than be divided as a community on something like the Spirit Trail. It's such an exciting project to move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll keep my comments brief, and I do hope we find some time for public input because I know people have given this a lot of thought, and I do look forward to hearing from the public with respect to that. Just a couple of completions to my comments. The idea of spurs is something I'm open to. I'm really interested in the northern route for the trail, but I certainly have an open mind to how that could be connected with spurs. On the issue of grades, and I know this was an education to me, I had thought that any trail that was to the north of Mount Seymour Parkway would involve the kind of grades that you encounter as you come down Mount Seymour Parkway approaching Deep Cove Road, which I'm told is close to 13%. And I'll certainly weight the engineering and scientific analysis of this. But what I walked through this morning, I think offered a lot of opportunities, and it was to the east of Mount Seymour Parkway through the forest. I think there's a lot of opportunity for grades that are much less than that 13%, more like I'm thinking about half of that. So I think we wouldn't want to prejudice the idea of the northern route, the E-type routes, E and F type routes as being too steep, but I think there are ways of engineering them at least substantially, except in a few perhaps very short sections that aren't going to be unduly steep. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. What was it now? Well, I do agree with your idea, Mayor, about spurs. I mean, we don't have to have a direct route in or fairly direct route in and out and forcing all the traffic, as Councillor Mary has said, down one or two particular routes. And so I do think that I'm in favor of looking at that, somehow connecting, because I think Kate's is very important as well. And I would hate to see that disappear, that connection disappear. But maybe there is some way we can have sort of a northern central trail to, and then have spurs out to Deep Cove, to Kate's, down to Dollarton Highway. I don't know. And I have to walk. I haven't had a chance, just haven't had a chance to be walking or biking or driving through the trails out there up until this week. So I want to do my homework before I make a decision. And one question I did have for staff was, I'm looking at your timeline here because I really don't want to delay this, but I want to make an informed decision. So it shows Q2 for council. So that would give us to end of June. If I'm reading that right, that you could still stay on track as long as you get a decision by the end of June? Is that,
Well, through your worship, yeah,
I know
we
you'd like it
couldn't
sooner.
go more granular than this without making the schedule not really legible for
Yep.
tonight's purpose. But effectively, we're here now, and that's our,
You wanted a decision tonight.
we're looking for council feedback tonight.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
through
what
your
if-
worship, if I may, about the spurs, because that's come up a lot. I do want to recognize taking the trail through Roche Point Trail and to Kate's Park does not preclude using E or F as the way to get to Deep Cove. You don't necessarily have to connect Waywitch and Kate's Park to Deep Cove using A, B, C, D, Roslyn. You don't need to make that connection. So the spur idea is totally on the table, and as our planning has done, that could be the outcome here. That's certainly on the table.
So I guess my question is, other people besides myself want more information. If we could get information back, we're at the middle of May. If we could, I know staff has a heavy workload, but if we could get some of the information that's been asked for tonight, if we could get that back by the beginning of June, if we then were able to make a decision for you 2 weeks from now, would that still keep you on track?
Through your worship, depending on the information requested, we can get some information back, but there's a lot of technical work that would need to happen in order to really evaluate the options you're seeing. Tonight, we're really just asking, should we proceed with the Seymour River to Windridge Park, the green segment on the left of the page? And should the Spirit Trail connect through Roche Point Trail to Kate's? All of the other questions are open for another 12 to 24 months.
Well, I think for the reasons said by a few of the counselors around the table, that decision's not going to happen tonight. So, by some of us anyway. It needs to be, this is too precious and it needs to be an informed decision. And I'm sorry, but I can't make that tonight. I could make it after this weekend.
Just my own comments on the matter. I think I'm hearing consensus forming on the Windridge portion. I think I'm also hearing enough people saying that they like the spur idea, and whether it's just a spur or whether it is the ultimate link between there, it's sounding like there's enough support to look at the Roche Point Trail connection out to Kate's Parkway, which sounds like there's enough support for that under either case as to whether it is a spur that goes to the park or whether it becomes the elbow of the Spirit Trail looping up to Deep Cove. So it doesn't sound to me like there's a disagreement on that. It's just whether we need to know whether E and F are viable as to whether or not it splits or whether it loops. But what you're asking for, I think I've heard around the table general support for. So I got a full list of speakers again. I just want to be clear about that. That's what I'm hearing from it. And I've got councillors Backma and Murray.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Little, for conveying that, because that's what I'm hearing as well. And I'm certainly open to the spur idea, but I do want to emphasize that staff are looking for a decision on Roche Point tonight. And council, we were aware of this. It was in the report. We knew this workshop was coming. And so there were opportunities that, maybe you could have taken to make sure that, we could make this decision tonight, because it is what's going to keep us on track. So I'm open to the
With
spur.
one comment though, E and F were just put on the table for the first time at this point. If I
Right.
may.
Okay, but I did think it was clear that Roche Point, given its target completion of 2025, it was clear that tonight we were going to be making a decision, or at least giving some direction. So I agree with your comments. I think Roche Point will work no matter what, if we do a loop or if we do a spur, and I'm certainly open to a spur type option. If somebody could tell me how to ride E and F, I'm a fairly good cyclist, and I was challenged getting up there today as well. So I'd love to hear from some of the residents of that neighborhood to get some of their feedback and in terms of routes that you use. But I certainly found that a challenge. But I think either way, Roche Point can and should be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I'll make this quick. Just to be clear, Okay, I support the Seymour River Windridge portion. Full stop. I support the Rose Trail down to Ware-Witchin. Full stop. If we're looking for other routes, we talk about spurs. I'm going to throw out something else. This is what I heard from staff, and they know my feedback. I'm just going to make it sure. When I said come through and go to Parkgate, make a hard right south, or find an option north. I think that's what we call the Y solution. So I put that out there. So there you have it. My 3 input. Is it all clear? Good?
Yes.
Okay, done. Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll call it the Y option rather than the spur option. Fine by me. Councillor Murray.
So I guess the only the problem with this though is that you get to Roche and then you're going to want to go through the park. And then we're right back to where we started, which is why all these people are sitting here. And then you ride through Kinloch or Caledonia. We've had petitions, a full petition from everybody on Caledonia. Then you ride into Myrtle and you run it down through Myrtle Park and then down Rockcliffe or Wickenden. This is the problem. So there's already a trail that goes to Rush Point, as the mayor's pointed out. So if you have a spur or a connection that heads to Kate's Park, it goes to Kate's Park and then it stops. That's the win. Mayor pointed out at the beginning of the meeting was to go left, which is a trail that comes out at Deep Cove Road with switchbacks because there's a large piece of municipal land, and then it stops. And then people can look at a map and decide for themselves how they want to go to the cove. That's the win for the community. It can't always be how we want it. We have to build these things with the residents in mind, with the visitors in mind, with the businesses in mind, okay? And the infrastructure that we need to support this. We don't have infrastructure in the cove to support the amount of people that are going down there now. And yet we want to add more attractions, more amusement. That is what is frustrating about this. So these trails already exist. You ride them all the time. It is how we rode all the time and how we got anywhere in the Seymour because there were no buses and our parents only had one car. It's how we got from point A to point B. And those trails are already there and everybody uses them in a different way. So this spirit trail concept, we have to have a trail that is with spirit, but not the concept of the spirit trail where it is one trail that goes from point A to point B, because it's not realistic. It was meant to run along the waterfront. It's not anymore. So we have to get beyond trying to make it perfect, going through an area with one set of wayfinding for a route that is as complex as this place and that has as much impact as any other area in the region for volume and for lack of infrastructure, not to mention it's a dead end. So if this spur idea or a finger off of some trails is going to say a sign like Whistler, like the Valley Trail, this is the way you go to the village. This is the way that you go to the golf course. This is the way that you go to Alta Lake. This is the way you go to Kate's Park. There you go, you're at Kate's Park. Now figure out how you're going to get back, right? There's lots of ways to get back, and different people will ride in different ways, or roll, or hike, or walk, right? That is the win for the community. That's what they want. And I think that's our responsibility to give it to them in a way that doesn't impact anybody negatively through one route, but spreads it out so it's fair to all.
Thank you very much for your comments, Council. I don't see any further speakers at this time. I would like to take an opportunity as we get to the end of our meeting to hear from members of the public. So we do have 3 people that signed up to speak. So we have Travis Schisler, Janice Edmonds, and Adrian Cook. Is Travis Schisler here? Thank you very much, staff. Thank you. soon as we're done, we're done. I'm only doing 3. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 3 minutes to address the workshop.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little and councillors. I'm speaking to you as a member of the Seymour Neighborhood Alliance. I'm an avid cyclist who commutes to Vancouver by bicycle. I'm a father of 3 school-aged children who regularly cycle around the Deep Cove community. I'd like to share my concerns behind the proposed Spirit Trail, in particular the section from the Roche Point Trails to Deep Cove. As someone who's ridden all the pathways and roads in our community, the proposed southern route struck me as dangerous and unsuitable for the fitness level of the average cyclist. As a physician, I'm taught to first do no harm, meaning that when a decision is to be made, first consider whether any options present an unacceptable amount of risk. The existing southern route options are simply dangerous. Over 65% of the southern routes are on roadways with nearly 200 driveways, thus forcing cyclists to directly interact with both moving and parked vehicles. The greatest harm to a cyclist, and the #1 reason I treat cycling-related injuries at my hospital, is trauma between a cyclist and a vehicle. Collisions occur when vehicles overtake cyclists at intersections and when vehicles suddenly pull out of driveways or when parked cars move or open their doors. Collisions between cyclists and vehicles are simply unavoidable, even on quiet streets. Therefore, it behooves those planning a cycling route to avoid roadways when it is possible. The severity of cycling-related injuries also increases as speed increases. The proposed southern route options include steep grades along crowded residential streets using either Roche Point Road or Dollar Road. The average gradient for Roche Point is 13%, and for Dollar Road, 9%. For comparison, the cut from the Mountain Highway on-ramp to its crest is 8%. Descending these roads at a safe speed requires balance and considerable strength while being vigilant for parked cars, driveways, and in the case of Dollar Road, even buses. These options are not only dangerous to descend on, especially for children and older adults, but are unclimbable even with strong fitness and mountain bike gearing. In summary, the proposals are characterized by too many roadways with an unacceptable degree of interaction with vehicles and incorporate long, steep gradients that no cyclist would choose to ride on. I asked the district to instead consider the proposed northern route options, which can be routed on existing paved pathways on green space and with few steep descents. These descents, in contrast to the southern route, do not require cyclists to navigate vehicular traffic as they are largely in the forest. When it comes time to vote on the various options, please remember first to do no harm. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
For your comments. Nope. Sorry, folks. Sorry, folks. In our council chamber, we don't allow applause or booing or cheering or anything. We want to make sure everybody feels welcome to share their opinions and they're not deterred from doing so. The next speaker I have is Janice Edmonds. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 3 more minutes to address the hearing, please, or the workshop, whatever we are.
Yeah, we're out of hearings, remember?
Yeah, that's true.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Janice Edmonds. I'm a resident of North Van and a member of the Seymour Neighborhood Alliance. This alliance began the night of the Spirit Trail Eastern Extension Information Meeting due to serious concerns about the proposed routing of the trail and public safety. There was a follow-up meeting shortly after at Parkgate with about 150 residents attending. We have a large group. We are very concerned about the route that has been planned so far. We are in favor of the Spirit Trail, but a lot of my concerns have already been spoken by the physician. I have been a nurse for 40 years, and my main concerns are safety and health. The vision of the Spirit Trail and the reality of the proposed route are miles apart. The vision is an image of walking or riding your bike with family or friends along a safe, accessible trail through green space to a destination. The reality of the Eastern Extension proposal includes approximately 75 to 80% roadway. Long stretches of the proposed route are in residential streets, and I'm not talking just about my street, it's all the streets. Vancouver doesn't happen to have a forest next to it. That's why they built it on the roads. We have a forest that we can use. Residential streets, we have more than 200 driveways, as you heard. We have garbage trucks, delivery vehicles. The province wants us to increase density. Everybody has a basement suite. There's more and more cars. The route crosses many busy commuter streets with dangerous intersections. As you are aware, collisions at mid-block conflict zones such as driveways, alleyways, were the second most frequent type of reported cycling collision after dooring. When you decide on the Roche Point Trail, you have to remember that it ends on Dollarton Highway, and the routes along Dollarton Highway aren't safe for kids. Another reality of the southern route is that it goes uphill twice. It goes uphill in Windridge if you've ridden straight up that, then it goes all the way down to Ellis, and then you have to climb all the way back up Plymouth. Most of us can't do that unless we have an e-bike. I know there's some fit people here, but most of us can't do that. So 2 uphill routes when you go the southern route. And then if you go down Roche Point Drive, it ends on Dollarton Highway, and you've got a route along Dollarton, whichever configuration we want to do. We haven't considered the demographics. There's at least 4,000 more people north of Mount Seymour Parkway than south of Mount Seymour Parkway. We haven't considered connecting Blue Ridge. We haven't talked much about that. There's a perfect trail at the end of Tompkins all the way to the golf course. There's trails around the golf course. There's trails north of the ranger station on Mount Seymour that go all the way to the cove. We don't have to cross anybody's residential street or driveways. So we ask that the District of North Van consider entering into more meaningful conversation with the people that live here. We're a community of hikers and bikers that know the trails. I've been on all of the trails. I've hiked them, I've walked them, I've ridden them. We know the trails, we understand how we live. The previous information session was inadequate and didn't consider all of the options. Let's get this right. Let's do it now, get it right, build a trail, not a reconfigured road.
Thank you very much.
Pardon? It's got a bit of scribbles on it.
Or you can email the content to us. That would be fine as well. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Next speaker and last speaker of the evening I have is Adrian Cook. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 3 minutes to address the workshop.
All right. Good evening, councillors and Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Adrian Cook, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Seymour Neighborhood Alliance, SNA for short. Our members in attendance are wearing yellow stickers on their lapels so we can be clearly identified. I know what you're probably thinking, gee, I recognize that voice. That's because I recently starred in the YouTube specials titled Spirit Trail Northern Route and Spirit Trail Southern Route. Hopefully you all had a chance to watch both these videos. I was the narrator trying to suppress my huffing and puffing as I tried in vain to keep up with my co-star, Kevin Harrington. While I and SNA wholeheartedly agree with the building of the eastern expansion of the Spirit Trail, we do not agree with it going through quiet residential neighborhoods. You've already heard from other SNA members that we feel it is a safety issue for Spirit Trail users and residents who live along the proposed southern route of the Spirit Trail. Other issues with the southern route include parking congestion, unnecessary deforestation, and creating new crossings over a number of creeks. We have submitted a petition with over 300 signatures from both residents of the Strathaven neighborhood, Roslyn, Baycrest, Beachview, and Caledonia neighborhoods who oppose the district's proposed routes. This was before we saw the ENF option, and believe alternate routing through green space is the answer. This brings me back to our videos. We prepared this biking montage to demonstrate the district's proposed southern route and the SNA's proposed northern route. The northern route passes through 80% existing trails and green space, crossing only 20 driveways. Because these trails are already in existence, it makes this route more financially viable. It does not go down Cliffmont Road, which is a common misunderstanding. All the major intersections along this route have lights and crosswalks already in existence. Also, very few trees, if any, will need to be cut down. The existing pathways from Indian River to Strathcona have plenty of brush alongside, which allows room for the district to expand the pathway, adding some S-curves to moderate the gradient. The district's proposed southern route travels through quiet residential streets on roadways for 65% of the route and crosses over 200 driveways, which we've already heard, making the northern route more scenic and importantly, much safer. Unfortunately, both routes have some grades to contend with. However, on the southern route, there's no opportunity to create switchbacks options to temper the gradient. As Travis mentioned, the Dollar Road climb from Dollarton to Fairway is an average of 9%, and the Roche Point climb is an average of 13%. In comparison, the northern route from Indian River to Deep Cove, the average grade is 7.5%. There's a short section about 90 meters long with the average of just over 10% grade, but this area has the space for switchbacks to be added. On a personal note, I have 2 young children, ages 7 and 9. We're avid bikers and always choose to take the existing pathway along the northern route from our house on Strathaven to Parkgate or beyond to Deep Cove. I don't have any worry about cars backing out or kids running into the street when my kids are going on bikes quickly. That's why we stick to the trails where they're much freer and they can ride in safety. The SNA looks forward to working with the District of North Vancouver on the Spirit Trail. Together we can ensure we can get it right the first time. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you to everybody for preparing for the meeting. You know, I put it to Mr. Stewart to help us figure out some of these challenges, and what I would suggest is I understand that Northlands Golf Course has about 40 golf carts, and I was thinking if we just, you know, all took the route, we could put everybody in the room together on the golf carts, go the whole route. So if you can figure out the insurance and how to make that happen, I'd appreciate that. But we might have to pick a day the golf course is closed, but I do want to say that I appreciate everybody's interest in this and council taking the time to go out and explore the different routes. That all helps. But it just goes to show you that people really deeply care about the trails in their community, and it's obviously a big part of the character of the Seymour neighborhood is our forest and our trails, and so we do appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you very much to staff for their preparation for this evening's meeting, but we've completed the business of the meeting. I'll accept adjournment. Thank you, Councillor Murray. I accept. Everybody have a fantastic evening. Good night.